All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice question series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're turning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A parent reports that their child, who is typically well behaved, becomes aggressive and non-compliant when they have to do homework. The parent asks for an intervention. You explain that a functional assessment is needed first. The primary ethical consideration guiding this recommendation is what? So a couple of things here. First, we're looking at an ethical consideration. So we're thinking more along the lines of our ethical code and less behavioral. Now, when I say that, be careful, right? Because we're always thinking behaviorally, but we really want to get in an ethical mindset here. Second, the primary ethical consideration. And when you see something like the most important or the primary, that implies there could be multiple reasons, but you want to pick what is specified. Here's the primary ethical consideration or the main consideration. Now, the parent says their child becomes aggressive and non-compliant when they have to do homework. They want an intervention. You want a functional assessment. What ethical consideration is the most important consideration here? A, promoting the welfare of the client. Now, what is our number one priority? Do no harm. Promote the welfare of the client. So A, when we think about ethics, is really going to trump everything else. Let's look at B, respecting the dignity of the client. Sure, doing an assessment before an intervention does provide respect to the client, but it's not necessarily aimed at the dignity of the client in the purest sense. C, involving the client in the creation of the intervention. Just because you're doing a functional assessment doesn't mean the client's going to be involved in the intervention creation. And then D, the social validity of the intervention. Now, if this child is becoming aggressive and non-compliant, then this is going to be a socially valid intervention regardless. So really, even though A, promoting the welfare of the client is always going to be number one, right? Do no harm, it still beats B, C, and D just because doing an assessment before designing an intervention is going to provide the best possible outcome for the client. In a group home setting, a behavior technician notices that a client's self-injurious behavior increases whenever they are in the presence of a specific peer. The technician also notes that the peer seems to respond to the self-injurious behavior by providing attention. The technician suspects that the peer's attention is a reinforcer for the SIB. To confirm this without a full functional analysis, the technician's supervisor might recommend a brief assessment where the peer is systematically removed from the environment when SIB occurs. This would be a form of what? So what we've noticed is that when we have these long questions, a lot of people will either skip them or just stop entirely. And that's a big mistake, especially on your exam or practice exams. If you are skipping long questions on practice exams, you might be skipping very easy questions. Don't be intimidated by the length of the question. We're not worried about that because we're going to attack this question. And we're going to find out it's actually quite easy. In this case, we have a technician. They see the client's SIB increases in the presence of a peer. They also see that attention is likely the reinforcer. So we know self-injury happens in the presence of the peer. It's reinforced by attention. We're not doing a full functional analysis, but the supervisor recommends the peer is removed when the SIB occurs. Now, if we remove the peer when the SIB occurs, that peer can no longer provide the attention. So what are we doing? Well, we're withholding reinforcement for the SIB. If attention is the reinforcer, we remove that attention, or we remove the peer, therefore withholding the attention for the SIB. What is that a form of? Well, it's a form of extinction. With extinction, we're withholding reinforcement. The peer is not the reinforcement. Be very, very careful here, right? The attention. So the presence of the peer increases the behavior, but it's because of the attention. If we remove that peer, the attention cannot be given. We're withholding the reinforcement. That's a form of extinction. If we think about B, negative reinforcement, again, the behavior wants the attention. So the removal of the peer is not going to reinforce the behavior. C, a component analysis. With a component analysis, we're actually analyzing an intervention itself. We're not analyzing the intervention here. We're just trying to do the intervention. And then D, a single subject reversal design is an experimental design. We're not using an experimental design here. We're doing a brief assessment because we were trying to avoid this full functional analysis where we're withholding reinforcement for the SIB. If we withhold reinforcement and the behavior changes, then maybe we can start to make the conclusion that we are right and that attention is reinforcement for the SIB. So this is a form of A, extinction. An adult client is asked to make a shopping list, but they are observed to be writing down every item they see in a magazine rather than the items they need to buy. The behavior analyst notes that the client's behavior is under the control of the written words in the magazine. This is a failure to establish what? So what have we failed to establish? What is missing? The client is told to make a shopping list, but instead they write down items in a magazine rather than items they need to buy. Why is that an issue? Well, if they go to the store and just buy items they see in a magazine, they could spend too much money. They're going to buy items they don't need. They're not going to buy items they do need. So that's an issue, right? They're making a list, but they're making the list with the wrong items. What have we failed to establish? A, point-to-point correspondence. Well, if they're copying the written words exactly, maybe there is point-to-point correspondence. We're not quite sure, but we haven't failed to establish point-to-point correspondence. B, stimulus control. Stimulus control is when the behavior is under the control of certain stimuli. Now, the problem is the client is writing down the written words in the magazine rather than the items they need to buy. This behavior needs to be under the control of the items they need to buy. So we have failed to establish stimulus control. C, formal similarity. Formal similarity is related to our verbal operants, where the two verbal operants are identical, right? So for instance, or the verbal behaviors are identical. So for instance, in a COIC, if I say bird and you say bird, there's formal similarity because the forms, both are spoken, are the same. Not what we're doing here. And then D, response generalization. Well, we haven't generalized anything. We haven't even gotten the right response yet. So what we failed to establish is stimulus control. We needed that behavior under the control of the items rather than the magazine. A behavior analyst has designed a token economy system for a classroom to improve on-task behavior. The teachers, however, are not consistently giving out tokens as instructed, and the students' on-task behavior is not improving. The most appropriate first step for the behavior analyst to take is to do which of the following. So this one requires thinking about your role as the analyst, right? You designed a token economy system. The teachers are not giving the tokens out consistently, and the behavior is not improving. Number one priority when you design an intervention, an assessment, a program, is training. And you're responsible for training your staff, or in this case, the teachers in the classroom, to do it correctly. If they're not doing it correctly, the first thing you want to look at is your training. Was your training adequate? So in this case, what's the most appropriate? Remember, here's another key word, first step. So there might be multiple things we could do. What's the first thing we want to do? A, revise a token economy system to make it easier for the teachers to implement. Now, some behavior analysts will jump to this option, but if you believe in your system and it hasn't been tested because it's not being implemented correctly, well, we don't just want to revise it because maybe the training was wrong or they don't know how to do it. So A is not good. B, conduct a functional assessment of the teacher's non-compliance. So two things. One, be careful with labeling behavior as non-compliance, right? Remember the dead man's test. Is it a behavior? Make sure we're targeting something that can be done, right? An effect on the environment. And then two, maybe a functional assessment might be needed afterwards, but what's a more parsimonious thing? What's a more parsimonious action? More simple? Well, C, provide performance feedback and additional training. Before we go on and assess and do a full assessment on the teacher behavior, look at the performance and give feedback. And what about your training? Was it good enough? Always start there. D, recommend a more intrusive punishment procedure to the teachers. Well, definitely not, right? We haven't even got this part right. Don't add more to the plate. The most appropriate first step in this case, provide performance feedback and additional training to the teachers. A new client, an adolescent with limited communication skills, is being assessed. During a meal, the client is observed reaching for a bag of chips. The behavior analyst provides the chips to the client. This is the form of what type of operant? All right, straightforward question to end it. Remember, a lot of questions on the exam. Not everyone is going to be that difficult. When you get an easy one, we answer it, trust it, move on. What type of operant are we looking at here? The adolescent with limited communication skills. Just because they're limited doesn't mean they're missing. During the meal, the client reaches for a bag of chips. Chips are provided. What is that? A, respondent operant. Well, it's not a respondent behavior, right? It is an operant behavior. So A is clearly not the right answer. B, tacting. Tacting is what? Tacting is labeling a nonverbal stimulus. And that's reinforced typically through social praise or GCRs. Here, client reaches for a bag of chips or given bag of chips. So they're requesting those chips. So is that an interverbal or a mand? Well, it's a mand. An interverbal is conversational, having a conversation, answering questions, that sort of thing. In this case, the client asks for the chips by reaching for them, and the analyst provides the chips, thus the reinforcement. This is a form of manding. Thanks for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout-out. Work hard, study hard,